Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared, and here's the review on the Kizer Orme. So this is in 20 CV blade steel. Beautiful stone-washed blade. Now this does come in a couple other options. This one's the G10 version and titanium milled clip. Now I have been impressed with this little guy. I never would have thought that this thing was going to be as useful to me as it has been. I never would have thought I would enjoy this thing as much as I did. So I brought it to work. And when I brought it to work, I really didn't know what I was going to be doing that day, or what I knew what I was going to be doing, but I didn't know, what type of cutting I'd be doing. And it just so happened that it was a day that I needed to open up a ton of boxes from the top, flip it over, and the bottom, among a bunch of other things. But having this little guy on me, it was a complete asset. It worked so good for me that day. So it made me appreciate this knife so much more. And we'll get more into that here in a second. But let's talk about this action. Whoa, really quick. I just want to let you guys know that I do have a 10% discount code to MOJAVE Outdoors for all your Kizer knives. Definitely check that out. I also have links to my Patreon, my Instagram, and all kinds of other stuff. Check out the description. Let's get back to the video. So it is a top flipping knife, and you can see the jimping right there. Now, unlike like a regular flipper where you'd flip it right here, with this one, you lay your hand, or your finger, sorry, right over the top, let the jimping grip your finger while you're pressing down, sort of, and then just pulling straight back. It's very easy to use. The detent is light enough to where it feels like it just rolls out, but it flies once it breaks that detent. Now, when it opens up, you'll see that because this, is a top flipper, it comes around, and then watch it when it locks up. You see how the top flipper is now right behind the lock bar. Very, very cool. I'll actually show a little picture of this taken apart, because it's pretty unique how the build, was done on this. And then you'll notice it has the little cutouts that Kizer's been doing on some of their models, where you can drip oil right into the pivot right there. And then it also takes a little tiny bit of weight relief off from the opposite side, which, just like all the other ones that have that little cutout, it is complete fall shut action. I mean, 100. It's not drop shut, it is fall shut action. Very easy to disengage too. The liner pokes up just a little tiny bit on this side, a lot on this side, and it is very easy to disengage. The detent is nice and early, very, very early. So you're always past the detent. And it doesn't have a conventional flipper, so, that doesn't really hit you. And you can let it just drop all the way down, or you can let it disengage just a little bit, because you can let this little section right here hit your finger if you want. It's kind of up to you where you let it drop. But either way, it's a fall shut action, so you do not expect this little tiny light blade to be like a guillotine, but it is. It is absolutely a guillotine. Now, when you top flip it, you can just do a conventional front flipping action. But I found that I like to take it and rotate it towards myself like this, and then put my thumb directly on top and spring it straight down like that. It's very satisfying to do it like that. Nope, that was my fault. Very easy to do. Very, very fidgety. And even with the front flip, like, you can just do like a little pinch thing like this. There's so many ways to kind of flip this thing open that is satisfying. And what's really satisfying is when I do it like this, it doesn't even feel like I opened it. It feels like I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's just open. Like I rub the jimping and bam, it's open. It's very fast. This blade opens up incredibly fast. That was my fault right there. I'm fumbling it in front of the camera, but it's incredibly fast deployment. It almost feels like an automatic because it's just so quick. But getting into the ergos on this thing. So I think this is where or one reason, aside from this blade, because it has such a straight back design, but because these ergos are so neutral, it doesn't matter what grip I'm holding it in. It's the same. So it's so comfortable in so many different grips. I feel like I can use it in so many different ways that it's just easy to manipulate. And that's why I think it benefited me so much in my day's work with this thing, because the type of cuts I was doing, I would have to take a box and I'd have to go a sideways cut. Then I'd have to turn it around this way and cut the sides. And then I'd have to spin the box and go from the back side. And it worked so good with these ergos. Plus this little utility style blade, this tip makes it to where you're not going to wreck anything on the inside, and it's so versatile, and it's like a little utility blade. So aside from the utility cuts, just from slicing, like if I'm cutting up some cardboard and stuff, it cuts extremely well. You have good ergos, so the pressure in your hand is rock solid. This little spot right there really pushes up into my hand right there, so it's like it just has a good grip for slicing. And even with push cuts, it just works great. So slicing and cutting with it, from the things that I was cutting with it, worked fantastic. The geometry is pretty good too. 15 thousandths behind the edge. Now it is a short blade, so it's not going to be, I can't say it has amazing geometry just because it's a short blade. Like it's kind of hard to say that without it being, a very, very thin blade stock, but it's good. It's good to go. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But with the utility cuts, it goes without saying, this thing is insanely good at utility cutting. So you can do draw cuts, utility cuts, opening things up, opening packages up, cutting tape, all those things. This thing is going to shine. It was born to do that, basically. And then, like I said, coupled with the ergos and the grips that you have with this thing, make it incredibly useful. Now, the clip. The clip, it's not a big clip. It is a short clip, and it does sit a little bit high of the scales, but it's good. It works just fine. It doesn't have a lot of tension, but the one thing I love about it is it does not shred my pockets. I am so sick of clips shredding my pockets that I'm happy when a clip slides in and out with no risk of snagging my pocket. So this one works just fine. It could have a little bit more tension, but it works just fine in and out of the pocket. And, aside from in and out of the pocket, in the hand, it does have this little spot right there where it goes straight and then down right here that winds up sitting nice in the hand. A lot of times with a little knife like this, the clip can be aggravating in the hand. This one's not, because it's got this little, slope right there that's nice and comfortable. So, next thing, this thing is milled out all the way. It only has one standoff. Its build is very, very nice. Now, going to some bad things. So one bad thing, probably the worst thing in my opinion, I wish the plunge grind was done a little bit better, because the plunge grind does land right behind the edge. You'll probably get one sharpening before you start hitting the plunge grind. Now, why am I complaining about that? Well, is it going to affect the ability to use it or anything? No, it's not. But when you sharpen your knife, you don't want it to be ugly after. So, and right here, when you're sharpening, it's hitting the plunge grind right there. Right now, it's hitting it. So when I go to sharpen, it's going to hit that plunge grind and create a smile right there. Now, another thing is that it hits my stone. So it can chip my stone. Stones aren't cheap. They're very expensive. And it just makes life easier to be able just to get on the stone and sharpen it without worrying about hitting anything back here. So it just makes life a lot easier for sharpening. And another thing, it looks good. It makes it look so much cleaner and better when you don't have, when you just have a nice edge across your blade rather than an edge and then an ugly part back here from hitting the stone. Now, it doesn't really matter, because this has internal stop pins. So since it has an internal stop pin up here, nothing's blocking you right here from cutting in your own choil. You can easily cut in a finger choil, a regular sharpening choil, whatever you want, if you wanted to. Now, I will say, though, I do wish, that's one thing I would like to see Kizer improve on, is their plunge grinds. Not even necessarily the sharpening choils, just the plunge grinds. You know, the point from the thickest point right here and how it tapers down to the edge. I'd like to see the plunge grind end way before the edge so that, you know, it's not thick going down to the edge from the thickest point of the knife. Now, aside from that, everything else is just minor BS. We have T6s. I'd rather see T8s. I could say the clip could be have a little bit more tension, but it works just fine. So I'm not really complaining about much there. And technically this clip, I kind of like the way it sits because when I shut it, it won't come over my microphone, but it has a nice little ting to it because of the clip. It probably won't come over the microphone. I don't know if it came over the microphone, but I love it. It has a little ting to it because of this. Wait. Anyways, doesn't matter. Point is that I actually like it. Next thing, there's really no other real negative things. All in all, I mean, this thing's very impressive. I love how tightly fit it gets inside there. It's so easy to carry, nice and centered. The build quality feels really good, and it's so useful. That is just one thing I really liked about this thing, is how useful it is for EDC specifically. You know, the normal things that you're going to do with an EDC knife. Now, obviously, it's not a hard user, and I will say that it possibly could have a little bit better geometry. Now, it doesn't have bad geometry, so let me just be clear with what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is since it's a flat grind, okay, every time you sharpen it, it's going to get a little bit thicker. So this is the thinnest point it will ever be. Every time you sharpen it, a little bit thicker. So eventually it's going to have not the best geometry. Now that's going to be a bunch of sharpenings later, and you might not even ever get to that point, to be honest. But it would have been nice to have been a hollow grind or just have a little bit thinner blade stock, because you see the taper right here. We have a flat portion up here, and then, you know, so this grind is very, very short. Yes, it gets thin behind the edge, so I'm not complaining about that. Perfect thinness behind the edge, but it did start out relatively thick for such a little blade. And in the future, you know, you're going to get less and less. Your geometry is going to get worse and worse as you sharpen it. That's it. Not that big of a deal, because, you know, this is more of a, you know, a simple user. So it's not like you should be chipping this thing and, you know, banging it up, and, you know, it's not that big of a deal. But it's just something that I was thinking about, because you can see how the geometry kind of rapidly gets down to that edge. However, it does seem to slice very, very good. So, but yeah, man, this thing's pretty damn awesome. I like it. And surprisingly, because I never would have thought so. I would have thought like this thing would just been a little bit too, I don't know, simple. But sometimes simplistic is what works. And I think we tend to forget that sometimes, just how simple something, or how easy, how can I put this? I don't know. How the simple things work so well for you. You know, it's like we're so into all this extravagant things and adding all this and adding all that. And sometimes that just makes life a little harder, and it makes more of a hindrance to the use of the knife, when sometimes just something so simple can just work so good. And I'm going to link everything I possibly can down below. I do have a 10% discount code with Mojave Outdoors, and all the stuff will be linked down below. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.